meeting as we get going. We have Commissioner Walker, who is just getting connected. He is present. And Commissioner McCarley is not feeling well this morning, so she is maybe going to join us later for the RP funding workshop. We have City Attorney Davis out of town, and so Assistant City Attorney Sirianni is serving in his place, and we have Deidre Joseph serving in place of Mike Brossart. So with that as kind of the framework for how we get started this morning, welcome. As you can look at the agenda that I think you have a copy of in front of you, we start our meeting with a Sun and Fun. I don't have the right agenda study in front of me. That's really bad. I apologize for that. Just 1 second. I don't know what I did with my other copy. Stand by. Yep. I apologize. I misplaced the meetings and put the wrong one in. So we start at 3 o'clock, as you can see, and we have presentations by PAL, which we do annually, and it's wonderful to get that update, especially in a year that's been so challenging for them. And then the beautification awards, which Bill Cohen will do for the 2 locations. Then we have, it's a heavy proclamation agenda. So we'll have our sister cities, Lakeland Christian girls team won the state championship. So we'll be celebrating that with them. A Parent Alienation Awareness Month, a Child Abuse Prevention Month, Water Conservation Month, and then the Community Development Week and a Fair Housing Month proclamation. So it's normal for us to do these things in April because April is the kickoff into spring and spring into programs. And so that's why it typically is heavy in this month. We'll have a finance committee report that we'll talk about our consolidated audit, and of which you've all gotten a copy of. So if you have any questions for that, you would want to have that be prepared at that time. Are there any at this time in the agenda study that you want to discuss on the finance or ask of the finance committee? Mr. Stearns, did you have a comment you wanted to make? Oh, no, he does not. All right. All right, so seeing no other comments, then that takes us to the approval of minutes, and we have as part of the consent agenda, and the consent agenda items, we have the minutes, and the items are, the rest of them are on page 3, which is C1, miscellaneous reports on Mayfair use.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. This is the use agreement with the Polk Museum of Art for the annual Mayfair event by the lake. And this is something that you've seen on an annual basis. This will occur May 7th through May 9th. Things will be a little bit different this year due to the pandemic. I know that the logistic changes, they will not be doing a Mayfair Saturday night. And they're also separating the 5K run out of this agreement as well. Again, it's a standard agreement that we've seen from year to year. Other than the logistics concern, the museum will be paying a fee for the use of the premises that will be based on the reimbursement for services that the city provides. So stand for any questions with regard to this.
Are there any questions? Yes, Commissioner Reed.
So this would be, I understand there won't be any band, no dancing, and no race. Is that a fair statement?
I believe so. I know that the artist tents, those will be socially distanced as well. So we're really trying to follow the social distancing protocols. I believe Pam Page may be on. She could give you a little bit more detail on exactly what other events will be occurring, but I believe that you're correct.
Thank you.
I don't think it prevents your ability to dance back at home, Commissioner Reed, after you get one of those great artistic values that you purchase and take home with you. Pam, are you on, and do you have anything else to add?
The only thing I have to add is that there will be a race. It just will not be sponsored by the museum. It's going to be the Lakeland Runners Club, and they're still working on the details of that.
Is that a Friday night or Saturday morning?
I believe it's Saturday morning.
Okay, so those details are pending. Thank you. Any other questions by commissioners? All right, then let's go to C5.
This is an amendment to the ground lease with Tiger Town GM Limited. The City Commission selected Tiger Town in 2019 to develop the Parker Point Appointments, which is a multifamily affordable housing complex. And pursuant to that ground lease, it gave Tiger Town GM until the end of December 31st, 2020 to actually close and get the financing available. The only thing that we're asking here is an amendment to that ground lease. It would just extend that closing date to provide them time for financing to August 31st, 2021. They don't anticipate any issues with getting the financing. It's just taking a little bit more time because they're going through the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, but they don't anticipate any problems. All the other terms and conditions of the agreement will remain the same. So the only thing that we're doing here is extending that closing date to August 31st, 2021.
Any questions on that, Commissioner Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. I've gotten a lot of emails and calls in reference to this. I just like to put on the normal, take it off the consent agenda. I'm not sure if anybody will be there, but somebody may want to talk, but I think it'll be approved without much difficulty, but I still would like to take it off the consent agenda.
Any objection by the commission to do that? Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I too, as I'm align myself with what comments Commissioner Reed said, because I think because of some concerns and I guess questions that people, as you just mentioned, Commissioner Reed, are asking, I think we should do that as well. I think there was some question back when we approved it initially too about, if I'm not mistaken, I see Ms. Teresa's on the call here, about, I guess, actually the scope of where the location was and how it abuts the actual senior facility that's close to that kind of thing. If I think we got to make sure we get it out and it open so people understand the layout of the land, I call it.
Are there any amplifying comments you'd like to make, Ms. Samaya?
Good morning. Yeah, I just wanted to note that I do have some slides available to show that location for the purpose of that discussion. So we do have the general location map and then also building elevations and the proposed site layout. And also to note that part of the reason why they are seeking the extension is to allow them to finish up their city permitting through the site plan review process and also through building permits. And those two processes are proceeding. They are near completion. They do have some outstanding comments to address, but we don't see any issue with those being addressed well in advance of that August deadline that's now being asked for.
Okay, so I think it's probably the sentiment of the commission to leave it on the agenda and not a consent item, correct? Just raise your hands if that's a thumb up or a thumb up, maybe. Okay, great. All right, so that's what we'll do. We'll pull that off consent. That takes us to Finance Director Appropriation. Deidre?
Deidre, your mic is not on.
Good morning. Let's try this again. There's an appropriation request for the general fund and downtown CRA fund. As a result of the sale of the land to the Chamber of Commerce, Parks needs to relocate 3 employees to the Tiger Town complex. Along with housing employees and their equipment, the storage building also houses all of the city Christmas decorations, swan boats, irrigation equipment, artwork used as rotation pieces throughout the city, as well as spare seating for Munn Park. The cost to construct a new park storage building at Tiger Town for these employees, their equipment, and the other items noted above is $450,000. The funding for this relocation is recommended to come from the following sources: Downtown CRA, $290,000. General fund, monies from the recent sale of the parking lot adjacent to Bryant Stadium, Henley Field, to the Polk County School Board, $100,000. And $60,000 coming from the general fund catalyst site monies. Therefore, it is requested that the City Commission authorize an appropriation from the Downtown CRA of $290,000 and $160,000 from the general fund, as noted above, to the Public Improvement Fund for the construction of a replacement park storage building at the Tiger Town complex.
Are there any questions by commissioners on that? And is there any opposition to leaving that on the consent? Okay, one thing I would like to ask is that we activate that link to that document on the agenda, which is not active currently. So we don't have the copy of what you said, simply because we didn't make that a link on that VII.A. So if that could be done, it would just be nice historically to have that attached. All right, 8C1.
Yes, we have one item on the utility committee agenda. It is a task authorization with Geosyntex Consultants with the decommissioning of Unit 3. This is consulting services related to closure of the byproduct storage area, and the consulting services with Geosyntex would ensure compliance with the federal coal combustible residual rule during the closure. They'll be providing a variety of data review. We'll put together a report to complete the closure of the byproduct storage area, an evaluation, and then just also general support services related to the CCR rule. This would be pursuant to the city's continuing contract with Geosyntex, which was approved previously by the commission in 2019. All reimbursable expenses will be in accordance with the consultant expense reimbursement policy, and the total not to exceed amount of services is $68,500. And that's included in Lakeland Electric's FY21 budget as well.
By the way, did they get all the coal in this week? Do you know?
I don't know if there's someone on that can answer that. I'm not sure.
Hey, Ramona, this is Sean McGinnis with Lakeland Electric, and yes, they've received their final shipments of coal and are currently using it all up by Sunday.
Okay, very, very good. So on this particular issue, are there any objections to leaving it on consent? Commissioner Reed, question.
Thank you, Mayor Vivian. I just want to make sure that Ramona, this doesn't have anything to do with the city manager's unit C, number C, does it? They're totally two different related items.
Are you referring? There's something on the city manager's agenda. Oh,
sure.
I see what you're saying with Geosyntex. No. That's a totally separate item. But Geosyntex does have probably a continuing contract for a variety of like engineering projects. But this is what I just referenced was specific to the task authorization for the closure of the byproduct coal.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody object to leaving it on consent? Okay, we'll leave that on consent. And that flips us back over to the front page, past consent, which included the minutes. Requests appear from the general public, and we have Mrs. Gretchen Saronic is going to make, who is the vice chair of the OPD Citizens Advisory Board, is going to make a presentation on behalf of the ongoing OPD contract negotiations. That'll be read at the beginning of the meeting, and that will be reflecting the our advisory board's view, which we got a copy of that letter earlier, of their desire to see us move forward with VII.A on negotiations. Any comments or questions on that, Commissioner Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to ask, even before the agenda came out to us on Wednesday, if we can get an update from city management as to where we are with negotiations as far as the impasse. Where are we? I know we cannot, if I understand it correctly, because of where we are and how things are proceeding, we're not involved. And I did recall talking to Mr. Sherrouse and maybe a couple weeks or so ago, if I recall, and we're just waiting for them, meaning them, the police department, the union, to get back in contact with us, I guess, to make things move as we want it to be. I just want an update. Where are we? Are we still standing still? Is that moving? The needle moving at all? I don't know if it's the proper time to do it right now or after we get through the agenda, but I want to see if we can do that, have some kind of update.
Before he answers, Commissioner Selvage.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been a while since I've been involved in the negotiations of labor contracts, but Ramona, that's the one activity where we can meet outside the Sunshine Law. And before we start openly discuss this with Ms. Shernick or among us, shouldn't we reserve all comments and discussion until we have a private meeting?
Well, I mean, we certainly can't prevent them from coming before the commission to speak, but I mean, I know there has been a little bit of concern about, getting too far into taking a position, I think, as they go forward. We just don't want to be accused of unfair labor practices or that. And I believe our outside counsel labor attorney, Mike Malfitano, has cautioned us with regard to that as well. So we certainly can have them speak on Monday, but
No, I don't object to them contacting us, but Mayor, it just seems to me it would be prudent for the City Commission to reserve all comments until we meet as a labor negotiations team.
Your recommendation is that we're good listeners.
Okay. If I could, Mr. Mayor, I'm not saying, I don't want to violate anything that needs to be, of course, protocol. So if my ask is violating anything that's protocol, I would, rescind my ask. I just want to make sure if I had any personal conversation with my city manager, if that can be done, and I'm not violating. And if it's done among us as a group, if it's violating, then I rescind my ask.
I think what might be profitable is if we just got a little bit of a history of where we are from City Manager Strauss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will just kind of remind the commission of where we are, and I think in particular it's important to recall that what's been ongoing for the last couple of years has been a negotiation process between the city and the PBA, representing our bargaining unit members at the police department. That has been a process that we've been underway, as I said, for 2 years. The commission will recall that we have had closed door meetings to update the commission on the progress with that. However, last June, when the city made offers to the PBA at the time, we were notified that our bargaining members at the police department were considering switching their representation from the PBA to the FOP. And so that put everything on hold. And we've been on hold since June, waiting for that process to be completed. Back around, I think it was December or January, the bargaining unit members did switch their representation from the PBA to the FOP. The city has been basically awaiting the FOP, to get things in order with their members, to then, go back to the table to begin negotiations. The first negotiations occurred last week between the city and the FOP, and that's where we're at. We're still very much at the table, interested in negotiating to try to, come to an agreement on a contract. And so, that's where we find ourselves today, and very hopeful that we're able to do that. There were some pretty substantive conversations in the last negotiation session last week, and that's where we're at. There is a little concern about the Citizen Advisory Board and any comments that may be made, because as Ramona, sort of mentioned there, the Citizen Advisory Board was appointed by the commission, the police chief, and the city manager. And so there is a connection there to both city management and ultimately the legislative body, the commission. So I do think it's probably wise to be cautious about, what comments could be made. However, to the question specifically, we are not in an insulated period. We are not at impasse. And so negotiations are ongoing. So that does not prohibit management from speaking to the commission or from the bargaining unit to speak to the commission. I do suspect that, similar to the ongoing process we had with the PBA, there will come a time where we will need to probably have a closed door session with the commission, but we're not there yet. We've only had one negotiation session with the FOP, and we still have more to conduct. And once we get further along, then it will be there will be a need, I'm sure, to have that closed door session. It would just be a little premature for that right now, only having the one meeting last week. So that's where we currently find ourselves, negotiating with the FOP for the first time last week.
So particularly, thank you for that, because that's a very good update, particularly because of the sensitivity of the appointment that you made in that last mention. I think it is probably imperative that we are, to Commissioner Selvidge's point, good listeners. I see Commissioner McLeod and Walker both have a comment. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Sean, for the update. And, in terms of the timing, I know we all want to see a contract and wish that we weren't in a multi-year negotiation phase, that it would have been done by now. Sean, do you, in terms of, and you kind of alluded to this, but from switching from PBA, the police union, over to the Fraternal Order of Police, the FOP, has that, I would guess that has stretched this out even longer. That has delayed the process. I think that's important just to recognize that.
Yes, Commissioner, and so to my earlier comment, the city had made offers to the PBA last June, and it was at that time that we were notified of this potential switch in representation, and so we've pretty much we've been on hold waiting for that process to happen, if it was going to happen, and it did. And again, that process was completed. I believe it was mid-December, may have even been early January. And so, I'm sure the FOP, has again been getting things in order with their new members there at the police department. And we've just been waiting on that process to be completed. It is. And so as soon as they were ready, which was last week, we scheduled that first negotiation session with the FOP. But certainly, there was a pretty lengthy delay in that switch, for our bargaining unit members at the police department.
Commissioner Walker, did you have an addition?
No, sir. I would just want to make sure that I want to just thank you and thank Mr. Rouse for the clarification, because I think it's important for us to understand where we are in this particular process. So that's the reason why I asked the questions I did, just to make sure we understood where we were, because it's been a while. And I even forgot, as he just indicated, that we're not at impasse. And I'm thinking maybe we were. So that's why I want to make sure the clarification was made, and I appreciate you allowing that to happen. Thank you.
If I may also, Commissioner Walker, and to the full commission, as I've said, to the commission before, we could potentially, the way this process works, we may hit a period of time which is referred to as the insulated period. And in the insulated period, neither city management nor the bargaining unit can then have any further conversations with the legislative body, which is the city commission. If we should ever get to the insulated period, I will make absolutely sure that the full commission is aware that we are now in an insulated period and can have no further conversations either with the management to the commission or with the FOP to the commission. If we should get there, I'll make sure that it's very clear that we've entered that insulated period, and those conversations then have to cease.
So that's a very healthy discussion to have had, Commissioner Walker. Thank you for bringing it up, because I think it helps us poise our position a little better as we listen to that. Any other items on that particular topic, or any other comments on that particular topic? All right, then let's go to equalizations hearings. We have one. We'll of course cease as a commission convene. Any questions on that? And Ms. Sirianni?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything unusual about the list you have. And of course, later on in the agenda, there's a corresponding resolution for those as well.
Okay, with no other questions or comments. Public hearings 3, we're on second reading on 3 items. So the first is the vacation of a portion of a right-of-way.
Yeah, this is the portion of right-of-way on Kathleen Road. It's adjacent to what was already vacated at 822 Adams Street. The city has reserved a utility easement, and the other adjacent property owner on the north half, which I believe is St. Luke's, has no objection to this.
Any comments? All right, questions? Item 2.
All right. The second item is the proposed ordinance amending the firefighters retirement system. Essentially what's happening is that the IRS regulations have changed the distribution age, increasing it from 70 and a half to age 72. The other significant change with this now gives the surviving beneficiary the choice of either receiving a pension over a 10-year period, which is what was currently in existence, but now it also gives a second option to allow the payment of the pension over the lifetime of the surviving beneficiary. I believe the actuary has already determined there won't be any actuarial impact.
Questions on this? And I saw Mr. Stearns on earlier if he has any additions or amplifications he'd like to make. Commissioner Reed.
No, I don't have anything, Commissioner, or Mayor. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to ask Jeff, is that going to impact? We don't know the impact. We don't know how many people would apply for that and put our retirement plan in jeopardy of any sort.
I can kind of answer that question. When they're changing the benefit, they do it as an actuarial equivalent. So what they do is if the person wants the benefit over their lifetime instead of over just 10 years, they do an actuarial calculation and reduce the benefit accordingly so that it doesn't have any impact, any net impact.
So it should be a pretty neutral change.
It's intended to be a wash, yes.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, sir. All right, item 3.
Okay, item 3, this is the ordinance adopting the latest version of Florida's fire prevention code. As you were told at the last agenda study and last agenda when this was on, the state law also gives the ability to the city to add additional protections to the code that are a little bit more stringent than state code. And the changes that you had seen in this proposed ordinance were those changes that had existed. But with regard to one specific section, I believe there was a clarification of the sprinkler requirement for buildings that were 12,000 square feet would account now for the entire building, not just per floor, because there was some confusion about the interpretation. However, I know there was some concern as well that was raised by the commissioners at the last meeting. And one of those, so the fire department has gone back and discussed and reviewed the exceptions with regard to the sprinkler system, and Chief Riley will probably briefly speak on those and propose to the commission the possibility of amending that language out to remove the sprinkler language so that it now, the fire code would be consistent with the state law requirements as it specifically relates to those sprinkler requirements.
Chief Riley, any comments, sir?
Yes, sir. If you guys don't mind, good morning. Thank you for giving me a couple minutes here real quick. I'd like to go over these bullet points real quick just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So you guys, we've already let you know that, so the state of Florida adopts the newest version of the Florida Fire Prevention Code every 3 years. At this time that we're required also to adopt the most current version of that code, as well as any local ordinance on the same schedule. So our team worked closely with Assistant City Attorney Jared Simpson to clean up some of that language, to try to condense multiple ordinance into one, and to reduce any redundancies and to make it a little more clear for understanding purposes. Significant changes here. First and foremost, the Florida Fire Prevention Code does not give a definition of an enclosed structure, and that creates some confusion. So our ordinance would define that so that the customer knows exactly what they're looking at and what that means and what the requirements would be. Defining that term helps to alleviate any confusion or ambiguity for the customers. So the ordinance also defines and makes clear our requirements on the location of fire hydrants and the fire department connections. This is not a new requirement. It's been in practice for several years. Listing the requirement, we believe, will serve to inform the customers and eliminate any costly changes after the fact, in essence, giving them to the rules prior to, being in the 11th hour and having to make changes. This requirement is not specifically listed in the code. It's left up to the AHJ. There's also a requirement for access boxes for buildings with fire alarms or sprinkler systems. This is also current practice, and again, serves to inform the customer of the requirement. This requirement is also in the Florida Fire Prevention Code. The standpipe requirements on repair garages and parking garages, 2 stories or more in height, shall be required to have a Class 1 or Class 3 wet standpipe system. The Florida Fire Prevention Code would allow a dry system. However, the dry systems are intended for use in northern climates where freezing is a concern, and it's actually, the dry system actually comes at a higher cost to the customer, and we wanted to make sure that we spelled that out, and we made that available and made that understanding to them. And whereas a dry system really, from our standpoint, does us no good, because the whole purpose of that, having that system there, is for water, and if it's a dry system, it takes a delay in the response and the time of getting water to our firefighters when they have a fire in one of those structures. The big one is the sprinkler systems. Sprinkler systems are required in the Florida Fire Prevention Code for all occupancy types except business occupancies in all buildings with combined area totaling more than 12,000 square feet. So just so we all have the same understanding, when the building code uses the term business, they're not using it the way we do. We look at a business as pretty much any building out there that is not residential, and we call that a business. But in the code, they're referring to a particular occupancy type. They're looking at the building, they're looking at the construction, they're looking at the use of that building. And just to give you an example of a few other occupancy types, we have daycares, we have business, we have mercantile, we have healthcare, a bunch of different occupancy types, which trigger the exit requirements and the protection requirements and the sprinkler and standpipe and all those other requirements with that. So when we say business in this ordinance, we're talking about a building that has a business occupancy designation. And just to give you a little idea of what we're talking about, the example that comes to mind with me would be a building that is strictly offices. They have no assembly area that meets the code that would change them from business to assembly. They have no other hazards or conditions in there that would trigger another occupancy type. It's strictly just an office building. And that's what we're talking about when we say business occupancy. So currently, this is our practice is to require this, the sprinklers in these types of building, including business. That's been a past practice for us, and we have exercised that. And our requirement would be to include the business occupancies because we feel like that's the most safe thing for our customers, for our building owners, and for our firefighters when they have to respond to those locations for a fire. This requirement does indeed exceed the state requirement in the Florida Fire Prevention Code. However, it is permissible according to the call of the AHJ. Now, I understand that this one has created some pause and some concerns, and we've heard that. And I will tell you all that we are willing to consider removing this language and at your direction and follow from this ordinance and then follow the state code for all the buildings that receive business occupancy classifications. And so I'll take any questions that you all have. I have a couple of our fire inspectors joined us this morning to help out in case I need our subject matter experts. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Walker, then Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief Riley, for expounding on those bullet points. But I want to make sure I heard you correct. If regarding the last bullet point with the automatic sprinkler system requirement, if we change the language, give me an example of what if could happen and why. If we do change the language or make amends to the language, and that what if happens, what kind of position would it put our fire department in?
So prior to this discussion today, if we went out today and we had a building that was classified a business occupancy and they met the 12,000 plus square foot requirement, then that would trigger a requirement of a sprinkler system for that building. If we pull this out of the ordinance and we fall back to strictly what the Florida Fire Prevention Code says, then if they meet all the other requirements, then that particular situation, then they could circumvent doing a sprinkler system.
And that's I guess where I am in that crossroad. Challenges would present certain things for the building, for our fire department. Help me understand that.
Yes, sir. And the reason that we take the stance that we take is because obviously sprinkler system saves lives. And 99% of the time, if we have a fire in a building like that in the sprinkler system, 99% of the time that fire is contained or controlled by one sprinkler head. And so rather than that fire having time to spread and to grow and to potentially get out of control, those sprinkler systems will contain that. If there's people in the building, that means it's going to be safer for them and give them more time to evacuate and get out of the building. And then once we respond and we get on the scene, you know, that more often than not, we're dealing with a small fire, if any, and a water cleanup problem at that point, rather than, you know, a massive building fire. And it really, to me, as a fire chief, I can't quite wrap my head around why all other building occupancy types would be required a sprinkler other than the business occupancy. So we're kind of trying to wrap my head around why that particular one has been excluded from the code. But as the AHA, we just feel very strongly that that should be included as well.
So we're talking about lives, safety, and again, ultimately lives being saved possibly versus lives that may not be saved, and becoming a very safety concern, safety issue, if I hear you correct.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you.
Offset by obviously the cost of some people that might have a smaller area that makes it prohibitive to serve in a way that they may want to do otherwise. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Chief Riley, good morning.
Good morning.
as you are aware, we have a lot of industrial buildings within our city limits. And there again, would this be retroactive? Would people that have existing warehouses, they won't have to come back and sprinkle their building, I presume? They would not. It's only for new construction this point forward?
So it's my understanding, and I got Taylor and David both on the line that could help me with this, but my understanding, if they are current today and they're not required a sprinkler system, they would not be required a sprinkler system unless they do some type of construction, renovation, additions, or a change of use of that occupancy type.
Okay. Also there again, so anything under 12,000 square feet, a small warehouse that has multiple tenants and that would have maybe 3 tenants, each one of them has their own separate occupational license, they would not be required to sprinkle. Is that a fair statement? No, not exactly, because there's a lot of other things that go into play there. If it was a business occupancy and they were under 12,000 square feet and they had no other hazards or no other reasons to reclassify it a different occupancy type, I would say yes. But, just because it's under 12,000 feet doesn't mean it automatically does not need a sprinkler system, because there's a whole lot of other things that we have to consider there. So it does pertain to use as well as size.
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Madden.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief, for this colorful infographic. I think it's really helpful, and I appreciate that you've taken the time with your team to just look through, and just make sure that everything is clarified and more simple to read. I think one of the things that I wanted to say about the continuity with the state code is, if my colleagues will remember, things like the woman who was going to lease a building for a medical office purpose, and went about her due diligence and how much it would cost to occupy this building with her business, has a lease agreement signed, has had people look at it, who are familiar with the state fire codes, and has their budget all together. And then they realize once they move in and they pull a permit for anything, that now they have to put a sprinkler system in the whole building that they're leasing. Well, the landlord doesn't want to pay for that. He didn't have to have it prior to this lease. The lessee didn't, consider the cost of what, whatever the 70,000 or however much the sprinkler system costs. And so they really, this is quite a surprise, and, could put the person out of business, So what I'm seeing and hearing from folks, especially who might want to move into a building downtown, is that the buildings downtown don't have the sprinkler systems. And so the minute they, buy the building and move in, they might know the state code and think that they're, they won't have to get a sprinkler system if they're that business occupancy, and then all of a sudden they've gone through the closing process and they've, gotten all their financing in line and had no idea, that they'd have to, put in a sprinkler code because we have that extra layer of protection. And so certainly, we can appreciate that our fire department, goes above and beyond and provides great service and is award-winning. But we also have to consider, the businesses in our downtown and in our surrounding areas, that we would like to revitalize, some of the buildings downtown. We would like to see people moving in and having the opportunity to have office space, but not when our code is different from the state and you have different contractors who are used to building in other places who are like, no, you're good. This is what the state code is. That has often been a big, surprise to folks with a big price tag, that could be devastating. And so I think that there's merit to being, extra safe, and certainly, we want to save lives, but I think there's also something to be said that we're, in a high growth period, and, folks are trying to get into building space for post-COVID, and they just, if we're going to go forward with being, more safe and have an extra layer of protection than the state,
what are we going to do to absolutely make sure everyone in town knows that before they sign a lease or before they move into a building? And so that's the biggest concern for me. I think when I've heard from so many folks, and it's not that they don't want to be safe or they want to break the law, but honestly, a $70,000 sprinkler system is just really a huge shock. I would say sprinkler systems and elevators, for second floor activation now with ADA requirements that, are grandfathered in for folks who own buildings prior, but then when you pull a permit, you have to have an elevator for $250,000. Those are the kind of things that are just shocking out of people when they're just thinking about their monthly bills and how they're going to, pay their mortgage or pay their lease to be in business.
Yes, ma'am. And I would tell you this much, that my team's dedicated and committed to, we would go out to a site and meet with a potential business owner or someone that's even looking to explore, and we will do our absolute very best to point them in the right direction. Sometimes it's very difficult because without conceptual drawings and a plan of what that space is going to look like and how it's going to be used and all that, it's really hard sometimes to say yes or no, you'll be required this or you'll be required that without having the full picture. But we will absolutely do our best to point them in the right direction. And for the example you gave of like customer A buying and moving into a previous space that was occupied by customer B, those requirements, the changes to those requirements are usually triggered by a change of use. So if you're doing apples to apples, a true business occupancy moves into a true business occupancy. For the most part, those code requirements are going to be the same. But if you go from business to mercantile or business to healthcare or business to one of those other several occupancy types, then it triggers different requirements.
Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Reed?
Thank you. Stephanie, am I hearing that you want to go to our minimum standard? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
My personal opinion is to be in line with the state code for continuity and to give our builders and developers certainty to know what the code is. That's my personal preference.
I think mine is the same. I want to make sure we have adequate protection, but I don't want to be over and above what's required to make it costly on our participants in the city or our businesses.
I would concur. Other comments? Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Good discussion. Thank you, Chief Riley. So if we remove that provision, that is, it would just be, that language would be removed. Nothing would replace it. It's just that provision comes out of the ordinance. Am I understanding that correctly?
Commissioner, I can answer that with regard to, yes, that's correct. And if there is an intent with the commission to remove that specific language, the appropriate procedural thing on Monday would be to make a motion to remove that specific section, and so that the fire code would be consistent with state law. And then the other changes, if you have no issue with those would be as listed.
Okay, thank you.
Inspector Taylor Riley, do you have any additional roundouts you'd like to include just for purposes of this discussion?
Hey, Mayor, I don't have anything different than what Chief Riley already said. I think in my personal opinion, the reason that it is in there is for protection for the business as well as protection for the people occupying that business. But ultimately, it's up to your decision, your vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Walker.
I just want to make sure, after hearing what Ms. Sirani making on Monday, whatever the time for us to do, to make our vote, and if, of course, if it carries that way, wherever way it may go, certainly, Chief, we will make sure, we have to make sure that we make the public, I mean, those in businesses, aware of where it is and what results would be. Am I hearing that correct? You would do your part, like you said, always, to make sure they know.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Simpson, you had an addition to make.
I just wanted, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to point out that the section is 13.3.2.3.1, paragraphs 1A through C. And we would just be looking for a motion from a commissioner to strike that language. And then I would prepare a substitute ordinance that would be read in place of the one that's presented for you now.
It would, if we took a vote now, you'd prefer to have that be the one at the reading then, or are you just suggesting that you'd have it available for us in the event there's an amendment? The latter.
Right, correct, Mayor.
I believe that the intention of the city attorney was to present, to have that available, yes, like a alternative if that's the intent of the commission. But as far as for purposes, that motion would need to be made Monday, and then that alternative language could be presented at that time.
Okay, then we recommend that you bring that to the meeting, that amendment. Thank you. One other question I have, Chief Riley, is on the lock boxes, on the Knox boxes. That is for commercial only. That doesn't mean a residential alarm has to have a Knox box on a home, correct?
That is correct. The Knox company that makes those boxes, they do offer that to residential, but we don't have a requirement for that. And it's only for businesses that have automatic alarms or sprinkler systems.
Okay, it just said, I don't think it said businesses in that. And that's the only reason I asked the question. Certainly if that's the way it's written, that's fine. But it would, if somebody has an automatic fire alarm in their home, as this paragraph would read in this infographic, it would seem to infer it's residential too. All right, any other questions? Yeah, Commissioner Reed.
I think Mayor, Tyler, Mr. Riley had a comment, raise his hand briefly for a minute.
Oh, so go ahead, Taylor.
I was just going to mention that it wouldn't be required for residentials, but subdivisions, if they have a gate, they are required to provide access, but that's not going to be addressed by our ordinance. It's more addressed by the Florida Fire Prevention Code.
Very good. Thank you. This is good clarification. All right. Any other questions on this before we go on? All right. We're through the first three. That takes us to ordinance's first reading.
All right, the first one that we have for first reading is the adoption of the comp plan amendment. As you're aware, the city goes through this process approximately every 10 years. This would be adoption of the amendment through the year 2030. Believe you've already had a workshop on this, and even though this is a first reading, it will require a public hearing, and at that point, it will become an action item that will be transmitted to the state for review and comment. Once the state reviews and comments, it'll be sent back to the commission for final approval. And I think Therese is on to answer any specific questions you maybe have on that one.
Are there any specific questions from commissioners? If not, I actually have one. Ms. Maya, one of the questions as I was re-reviewing that I was thinking about, it gives a population expectation growth rate during that period of time. We wouldn't want that in any way to be something that undermines what we're doing on the PRWC for the water, millions of gallons per day. Did we look for any concurrency on that expectation? And I just would love a clarification if so.
Sure. So there's two responses to that. The first is that, as always, we're dealing with making sure that that population growth does not impact level of service for city infrastructure and services. So there's still a requirement that we meet our minimum levels of service in terms of both water and wastewater. And second point to that is that every, I believe it's 6 years, there is the preparation of a water supply plan, and that is aligned with more regional water supply issues. And so that was recently updated. I want to say it was back in 2018. So again, as this document, once it gets adopted, there are expectations that it gets amended over time. And so anything that would come out of the PRWC could ultimately be adopted into the comp plan through a text amendment at a later date. But currently it's aligned with all state and regional water permitting requirements.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions by commissioners? All right, thank you for the work, by the way, on that comprehensive plan. C1.
C1 is an appeal of the Planning and Zoning Board's denial of a conditional use application for a cell tower that the applicant is seeking to place on the east side of Hardin Boulevard between Lakeland Christian and Beacon Road. I believe that's located behind the dry cleaners there. This has been, I believe you've received some materials on this as well, a memorandum of law from the applicant's attorney. We just, as of yesterday, received a request for the commission's information from the attorney for the applicant. They are requesting that this item be continued to the April 19th City Commission meeting. Due to the complexity of the issues, I know this has been a hot topic amongst neighbors, as well as some issues for the applicant. So the applicant that is seeking to appeal is wanting a continuance. In talking to Palmer yesterday a little bit about this as well, we would probably recommend that the commission grant that continuance. We certainly want to make sure that that the applicant who's appealing, their due process rights are preserved if they're unable to make the meeting or seeking this request for additional time, so that maybe additional information can be had, and that the commission will have some substantial time to further review the memorandum of law that you were provided. Before you, what you have is, and just to go over procedurally a little bit, to cover the high points, the memo that you have there is actually a good summary of the procedure, that the appeal procedure from the P&Z board that will take place before the City Commission. The most important thing to remember, it's a two-step process, and that the applicant that's appealing is not automatically granted a de novo hearing, which is basically a brand new hearing before the commission. The job of firstly of the commission is to determine whether there aren't any deficiencies that existed with regard to the P&Z board's decision. And at that point, if the commission determines there were any deficiencies, and you'll see those set forth in your memorandum that would occur at that meeting, you could, if there are no deficiencies, then it would deny the appeal and affirm the Planning and Zoning Board's decision. Here, it's kind of interesting. The applicant is not alleging a denial of due process or lack of substantial evidence, but focuses instead on the Federal Telecommunications Act that states that a local government can't prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting wireless services. And in this case, the applicant is basically arguing that there are gaps in coverage in this specific area, and that the denial of the Planning and Zoning Board of the proposed cell tower violates the federal law, and under the LDCs, that the Planning and Zoning Board didn't properly apply the standards, and that the administrative staff failed to follow professional practice in the analysis. What's interesting about this, and kind of complicates matters a little bit more, is that the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is binding precedent on us, has not yet ruled on the issue of whether a gap in coverage actually constitutes an effective prohibition on wireless services that are contemplated by the Act. So I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of the process and what we're dealing with. Again, these are complex issues. The applicant has requested a continuance to the April 19th meeting. That might give you as well a little bit more time to review some of the materials or ask any further questions that you may have. I would ask, we don't want to get into a material discussion of all of the specifics of this case, because we want to reserve that obviously for a public hearing, and we want to ensure that the applicant appealing, that their due process rights aren't violated. And certainly the members of the public, in terms of the neighbors, have a substantial interest in this as well. And if your desire is to continue this to the April 19th meeting, then we would make sure we would reach out to the neighbors as well, and ensure them that this will be then moved to the April 19th meeting versus hearing it on Monday.
All right, so to rank over that briefly, continuance does not mean an endorsement of, it just means a proper vetting of circumstances considered. And so
correct. But what we do is just leave this on the agenda. You've seen other items, and we would just simply put continued, and that would be brought back April 19th for your consideration.
But would require a vote to do that, correct?
Yes, just your, yes.
Questions by commissioners? All right, thank you. Great explanation. No community redevelopment agency report. That brings us to city manager, sir.
Mr. Mayor, just yes. Mr. Mayor, sorry.
So
we would like to kind of get a thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of whether we would be interested in continuing that item, because we do need to let the applicant know and the community as well. So
those who would want it considered, the thumbs up. Continued. All right, so it's unanimous.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. Yes, definitely support the continuance. And Ramona and the legal team, I would be looking too as we move through this process. When you mentioned that it's an interesting argument that the applicant's raising about the violation of federal law, where that fits into the appeals process or not, and how we consider that as we move through it. So if you can, somehow just to make sure that we understand that and what we're deciding on April 19th, that would be very helpful.
Yes, and that's part of the difficulty with this, because there hasn't been any precedent set. So that certainly is a novel argument that the applicant is raising in this situation.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Good point, Commissioner McLeod. Thank you. All right, then that brings us to the city manager. As I stated earlier, city manager's rep.
Thank you, sir, and good morning again. The first item that I have for presentation is regarding an award of a bid to Cobb Site Development, approval of construction agreement with Cobb Site Development, and a task authorization with Civil Serve Design Group for the construction, engineering, and inspection services for the County Line Road at US 92 intersection project. This is a project that's been previously presented to the commission, and so we should all be aware of the details of the project. Construction plans for the project was prepared by DRMP and reviewed and approved for construction by the Florida Department of Transportation. The city's purchasing division advertised for construction bids beginning December 31st, 2020, and on February 10th, 2021, 4 bids were received. DRMP and city staff evaluated the bids and determined Cobb Site Development to be the lowest responsive bidder, and the FDOT concurred. Subsequently, then, a notice of intent to award was issued by the city's purchasing on March 8th, 2021 to Cobb Site Development. The protest period ended without any protest being filed. The city also solicited a proposal from Civil Serve Design Group, which is one of the firms that the city has on continuing contract for services required for the County Line Road at US 92 intersection project. And under a task authorization with Civil Serve, they would provide those services at the negotiated fee of $165,268. The project is funded in the FY21 Transportation Fund, and it is the staff will be recommending that the City Commission authorize the award of bid number 1033 to Cobb Site Development in the amount of $1,570,583.24, and staff will also be recommending that the City Commission allow the execution of a task authorization for the construction and engineering inspection services with Civil Serve Design Group as presented. That completes staff's presentation, Should there be any questions, we have Greg James with us this morning.
Questions by commissioners? That'd be a wonderful improvement, Mr. James. Thank you. All right, seeing none, not because of disinterest, just because of affirmation. Next.
Okay, the next item is regarding a change order, which would be number 3 to the construction agreement with Cobb Site Development for the North Wabash Avenue Extension Project. Another project that's been previously presented that we're all aware of and have worked extensively on for quite some time. The City Commission awarded the construction agreement to Cobb Site Development in October 2020, and construction commenced on November 30th, 2020, and that construction is approximately 30% complete. However, the city's Water Utilities Department, who has approximately 2,800 linear feet of new water pipeline and about 120 linear feet of new force main pipe to install as a result of their existing facilities being in conflict with this new roadway. Water Utility has determined that they do not have the staff or resources to complete the work within the timeline needed to clear the project for the road construction contractor to maintain their schedule. So to meet the schedule, the city requested and received a proposal from Cobb in the amount of $310,602.58 to complete the work. Cobb is also requesting an additional 16 days of contract time. The city's construction engineering and inspection firm, RK&K, and city staff have reviewed that proposal and find it satisfactory. Subsequently, then, change order number 3 to the construction agreement with Cobb Site Development was drafted to incorporate the required work as presented. Funding for the project is provided in the fiscal year 21 Water Utilities Capital Improvement Fund, and so staff will recommend execution of change order number 3 with Cobb Site Development as presented. That completes presentation, and again, Mr. James is with us if there are any questions.
Are there any questions by commissioners? I have one, Mr. James. What really technically had to happen to make this work?
Well, we work with the utilities, throughout the design process of the project, identifying, where their facilities are. We try to design around them where we can. In this particular instance, the pandemic had a major impact from the aspect of hiring freeze and then employees quarantining and things like that. So even in public works, we've gotten behind schedule a little bit because of the workload. And so that's what basically happened here was that they've just got so many projects they're working on. And part of that's public works' fault because, we've got with County Line Road, we'll have 3 construction projects underway that impact their facilities as well. And so this was, one opportunity that we could do to relieve their workload, at least for this project. And so that's what we've done.
Helpful to know. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for that information. Had we anticipated this, do we have any idea what it would cost the city to have done this job? I understand 310,000 was an adequate number, but if we would do it ourselves, how much less would it have been, just for my own information?
That is a good question, Commissioner. I need to ask my colleagues over at Water Utilities for that, and I can get that for you.
Thank you. There's Bill. Maybe he'll know.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everybody. We had originally budgeted for this section that we're looking at, the change order, of approximately $250,000. However, with these types of things, you never know what may happen, what things you run into the field. But that was the original estimate, if you will. And so we're looking at a difference of about $61,000.
Very helpful. And you didn't have the capacity to get to it anyway, correct?
Originally, we were planning. Yes, sir, we were. But as Greg said, with staffing impacts from COVID, we felt it best, to meet the time constraints of the project, we need to turn this over to the contractor.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. There again, I don't know if probably it's the right time to bring it up right now, but Bill, are you going to be available as the meeting goes on towards the end?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll wait till the last. Thank you.
Thank you in advance for joining us, sir. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, let's go to the next item, sir.
The next item is a recommendation for a task authorization with GeoSyntech Consultants for Lake Mirror Stormwater Best Management Practices Feasibility Study, also referred to as a BMP. Lake Mirror is an impaired water body due to excessive levels of nutrients in the surface water. Nutrients entering the lake through the city's stormwater system and area runoff contribute to the overall water quality impairment. The contributing area does not currently have established stormwater treatment BMPs. The Lakes and Stormwater Division requested a proposal from GeoSyntech Consultants, a professional lakes and watershed management services firm, and they're one of our continuing contractors with the city, to conduct the stormwater BMP feasibility study of Lake Mirror. The study will look at the contributing area to the lake and provide effective and proactive recommendations that can be implemented to aid in the improvement of lake water quality in Lake Mirror. The focus will be on quantifying stormwater nutrient loading at outfalls to the lake, assessing the feasibility of implementing the BMPs to capture and treat stormwater runoff prior to discharging into the lake, and also providing detailed conceptualization for the appropriate type and location of the selected BMPs for a minimum of one priority outfall to the lake. The BMPs will be designed to remove nutrients, sediments, and floatable trash from stormwater runoff discharging to Lake Mirror. Major elements of the project have been developed and are included. Funding for the Lake Mirror Stormwater BMP feasibility study in the amount not to exceed $158,828.93 is provided in the FY21 Stormwater Utility CIP. So staff will recommend the execution of a task authorization with GeoSyntech Consultants as presented. That completes staff's presentation. We do have Lori Smith available if there are any questions.
Are there any questions by commissioners? Commissioner Reed.
I'm sorry I'm asking so many questions today, but in the past, I think we've done two studies on our lakes. One was about about 60,000. Another one was 70. I was wondering if we got any other bids in just this one particular group that can. That seems like that's almost 2.5 times the amount of money we've spent previously on a study. They're getting, this may be more in depth, but I just wondered if we might have gotten some additional bids. This seems a lot higher than what we've authorized in the past.
Okay. Good morning, Lori Smith with Lakes and Stormwater Division. And right now we haven't done any in-depth studies on Lake Mirror. We do have a small task authorization with Wood to develop a nutrient reduction plan. GeoSyntech is on our continuing contract for lakes and watershed management services. They just completed one for Lake Morton, which was basically the exact same scope and almost dollar for dollar the same cost estimate. So this is being done because DEP has discussed with us that they are looking to possibly put regulatory restrictions on Lake Morton and Lake Mirror. So in order to show the DEP that we are serious about cleaning up our lakes and protecting our resources, we are doing these studies, and it is at the request of DEP that we're doing this work. When we do the continuing contracts, those consultants are vetted. We select the ones that have the best rates and the best experience. So when this study need came up, I looked at our selection of contractors that we have on our CCNA, and GeoSyntech is experts at developing stormwater studies and identifying BMPs. So that's the reason why we went with GeoSyntech on this project. I hope that answers your question.
I think it answers this question. And you believe that the pricing scope comparatively based on today's costs and needs are fair?
Yes, I do.
Other questions by commissioners? Good question. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Laurie. But I'm remembering, if my recollection is correct, some years back when we had a, I think, lengthy discussion about our lakes and the things that need to be done to, I guess, support preservation of lakes and stormwater, that kind of thing. I guess we were shared with, as you just mentioned about DEP and the regulations that they bring forth, as it would be. Would you consider this being, I guess, still an ongoing situation that we have to continue to do to make sure that we almost prove to them that we're doing what we can to preserve lakes in our core area? Is that right? Would I be saying that correct?
Yes. So DEP requires us to monitor our lakes, which entails collecting samples from each of our lakes on a seasonal basis. So 4 times a year, we collect samples. All of that data is submitted to DEP. DEP every 3 years looks at, well, they go through a rotation. So 1 year it's one set of lakes, next year that's another, and the 3rd year another. So they're looking at the data for all of the lakes in the state. And when it's our turn to look at our lakes in Lakeland, they evaluate water quality. They evaluate if they're going to put regulatory requirements on water quality for surface water bodies that aren't showing enough improvement. So in order to get that improvement, we need to do the studies and understand where we can do better and put those BMPs in place. So during this last go around, they looked at additional lakes. As you know, we have 5 lakes that have the TMDL requirements. They are regulated already. They're looking at another 4 lakes in Lakeland that they want to add to that list. And in order for us to try to avoid having that heavy regulatory weight on us, we're doing these studies to try to show DEP that we are being proactive and trying to put things in place to improve our surface water bodies. So it's a continual thing. DEP evaluates the surface water quality in all of our lakes every 3 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions by commissioners? Thank you very much, Lori.
Thank you.
All right, next item.
The next item is regarding award of a bid to Southern Roofing Company for a roofing project at Lakeland Linder International Airport. The roof at 3505 and 3515 Aviation Drive is in dire need of a roof replacement to be completed prior to our upcoming rainy season. The facility is leased to 2 of our core tenants at the airport, which is Publix and Polk State College. The roof replacement was advertised under bid number 1036, with 9 companies responding to the bid. REI engineers, along with airport staff, reviewed all 9 bid responses. The bid recommendation is issued based on the base bid, which is the roof replacement, plus bid alternative number 1, which also includes new walkway pads around the HVAC units, and bid alternative number 2, which involves painting the exterior of the building. Southern Roofing Company was determined to be the lowest and most responsive bidder with a combined bid of $781,839. REI Engineers, who is under our continuing contract with the city, will provide the construction administration services for the project in the amount not to exceed $46,100. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize city officials to enter into the contract with Southern Roofing in the amount as presented to provide the services outlined in the bid. It's also recommended that the City Commission authorize an increase in estimated revenues in the Airport Capital Fund in the amount of $275,000, along with a corresponding appropriation in the amount of $827,939 in Airport Capital Fund. And the method to accomplish that is provided and can be presented on Monday. With that, I will complete my presentation. We have our Airport Director, Gene Conrad, with us for any questions.
All right, I have a local bid question on the 829 versus 781, or $48,000 a differential. Did that not meet our threshold on the formula?
Mr. Mayor, I think it was about $6,000 or $7,000 apart from hitting that threshold. The 5%.
Yeah, I believe that actually, if I guess Springer would have come in, it would have had to be at 820,000, I think, their bid to actually come, the local preference to come into play.
Okay, thank you. Other questions by commissioners? So looks like we're going to put a lid on it. Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the next item. The final item.
All right. The final item that I have for presentation is regarding our mid-year table of organization modifications and appropriations. Throughout the fiscal year, requests arise from city departments to make modifications to their table of organization, or as we call it, TO. These modifications may involve adding, deleting, pay adjustments, or reclassifying positions to meet departmental operational needs or improve service delivery. This process involves a formal request that must include sufficient justification based on business needs to a review committee consisting of members from the city manager's office, the Office of Management and Budget, Human Resources, and Finance. Compensation requests are thoroughly vetted through the Human Resources Department to verify that each request is in alignment with our classification and compensation structure and workforce management practices. Once reviewed, the committee provides recommendations to me, the city manager, for consideration and approval. There are modifications that have been proposed to the city's TO that are included with this item by fund and along with their individual FY21 budget impacts. If you'll notice from the information that's been provided, there's only one that applies to the general fund, which comes out of the police department, and that's a request for a college resource officer for the police department that would be assigned to Florida Southern College, and the school will fund 100% of the cost, including equipment for that position. The other requests come from our enterprise funds, and one that would be, one request that would come from the building inspection fund and funding that's available through those fees in order to provide for those amendments. There are other reductions and eliminations of positions that net against the increases that would go along with these requests, and the requested appropriations are by fund. It is recommended that the City Commission authorize the identified table of organization modifications and associated pay adjustments for the positions that are included. In addition, it's recommended that the City Commission would authorize the corresponding increase in estimated revenues and appropriations from the unappropriated surplus of the funds noted below. So this is a process that the city historically goes through at mid-year. They usually go into effect in the April timeframe. And again, we've thoroughly vetted through these, and the majority of them do have offsets to accommodate the request. So I'll stand for any questions, and we have quite a few department directors available if needed.
Questions by commissioners? Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to ask if Nicole could speak to the building inspector. I know that that's been difficult finding enough, people to keep up with the demand of the permitting and inspecting. Could you speak to that, Nicole?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Madden. We've had quite an uptick in our building inspection plans review and the inspections. To date, we're pre-recession numbers. So we thought that the activity would have slowed down some since the pandemic, and it did for maybe a month or two, but now we're higher than we were for pre-recession numbers. There is a challenge because there's a shrinking, the industry is just shrinking as far as how many people are qualified in these trades. And so we have a hard time finding qualified building inspectors and plans reviewers, but they're out there. And we're also doing a lot to cross-train our own staff and trying to retain them so that we're not losing them to other municipalities or to local providers. So it's been quite a challenge, but we've been working very closely with HR and the city manager's office to retain the talent that we have and also try to recruit in this industry that's a little harder to retain.
Yeah, If I could also add, I think the commission will recall that at our strategic planning session, we had some discussions about kind of the difficulty of timing the market for these positions, you know, in a period right now where there's just an awful lot of permitting and construction going on. You know, we need to bring on staff that, you know, to accommodate that, but we certainly don't want to be left overstaffed, you know, when the market slows down. So I will tell you with this request, we did study and research the idea of actually adding twice the amount that's being requested here. But after a lot of discussion and research, we've landed on, we think that even with a slowdown, there's justification to add these positions as presented.
Well, furthermore, this is a particular area where we are creating a lot of costs for businesses if we don't expedite. These are one of the places that are so important for us to be yes if as we go forward. And I think your leadership, Ms. Travis, has been so wonderful in that regard, because this just continues to support that effort. We can always recoil later if there, you know, if we went through some kind of a slump. But our goal would be to have a trained team that works expeditiously. And we're tying to this still the desire to do some virtual approvals. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We have done a lot of efficiencies as far as our express permitting, and we do virtual inspections now for the items or the permits that we can do that. We offer that now. We fast track that through COVID. So that's available now as well. So even with the efficiencies that we've provided, we're still at a volume where we needed to add for additional staff.
Thank you. Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. As people have discovered that I'm back on the city commission, like the rest of you, I have been getting more and more comments about how long it's taking to process permits. Sean and Nicole, is there a possibility in this surge of permits that we can outsource any of this with the engineering firms nearby, with the people who are in the building trades that could come in and bridge this gap rather than bringing on permanent employees?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Go ahead, Sean.
Commissioner, I will. We have done that, and I can tell you that what we've run into most recently is we're having a hard time getting any response from the private sector who could do this type of work for us. That it is, you know, we're just construction is hot right now, and the private sector, it's hard for us to even contract with anyone at this time because of how, you know, busy they are and all of the work that's available. So it is a challenge, and it's really, you know, again, why we're making the decision to add this staff. And then Nicole, any other comments that you may have? But we have done that, and we've even attempted to do that recently, but we've not been able to get any contractors in to do that work.
And just to add to that, the temporary help or the private providers that we're able to contract with, it's so sporadic. We get them for a couple days a week, and then maybe one day next week. So it's not a consistent service that we can rely on, and it's just a sign of the times and where we are right now in the economy.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments on any of the other departments as well? All right, I think we are finished with that. Do you have any additional comments you'd like to make, City Manager?
The only thing, Mayor, that I have, and we don't even have to discuss it now. You may want to wait until the end. But at our last commission meeting, if you'll remember, Mr. Fred Lohr appeared, and staff was, you know, directed to have further discussion with Mr. Lohr. We were ready to address those issues at that last meeting, and so I just a reminder on that, and we are ready. Whether it's today or Monday or any other time when the commission's ready for us to address those code compliance, you know, related issues that you heard.
Since we have a workshop, I would recommend we do that on Monday and not do that this morning if that's possible. All right. I see no objection to that. That takes us to City Attorney Ordinances 1.
Yes, what we have here is the City of Lakeland investment policy for long-term funds. This is the ordinance that implements what all of you discussed at your finance committee meeting on Monday and adds the public improvement endowment fund to the investment policy plan, and would also, that would be where the include the $215 million hospital payment into that as well. And if there's any questions with regard to that.
To clarify,
Mr. Stearns.
yeah, I mean, this particular amendment just amends the investment policy. There's another item later on in the agenda, which does some of the things that were just mentioned. This strictly makes some small technical changes to the existing investment policy for long-term funds that we came up with when we were doing our year-end audit and our year-end review of that policy. So again, what we talked about at the finance committee, some minor changes to that existing investment policy.
Primarily, this is for conformity and slight tweaks.
Correct.
Commissioner Reed.
Are we going to discuss that additionally? Again, I was unable to attend that meeting on Monday, but can I get with you, Jeff, and find out what it's going to be before Monday or
Sure, absolutely. But there's another item that we will be discussing a little farther down in the agenda, which is the creation of a board for the Public Improvement Endowment Fund.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Cranking through resolutions B1 will be our lots and cleaning. We'll just approve what we did earlier. Item 2.
Item 2 is the Juneteenth resolution. In crafting this, I know that Palmer reviewed and worked with Doris Moore-Bailey regarding the language. So she has seen the language, and nothing contained in this resolution would conflict with the May 20th resolution that the City Commission previously adopted.
Correct. And we have all had a chance to take a look at that, and I think it incorporates everything we want to make sure is included and reflects what we have done historically as well. Any questions on that? Okay, next.
Okay, the third item is a vacation of a property on 98 North. Hold on, let me just switch this. Currently there's a utility easement that splits the property, and the property owner potentially wants to develop that property. The owner has already dedicated a replacement utility easement. So we're just asking for a vacation of the current utility easement.
Any questions on that? Next.
The next resolution is a resolution authorizing execution of a revised joint participation agreement between FDOT and the City of Lakeland for appropriation of construction funding. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping one. Or hold on, I jumped ahead. Hold on, there's 2 of those. This is a resolution authorizing execution of a supplemental joint participation agreement with FDOT for funding to support improvements on, this is the one for runway 927 at Lakeland Linder. The airport has received a multi-year grant from FDOT to support the improvements on 927. The current FDOT supplemental agreement provides for the remaining project funding of $4,042,238. The primary source of funding for improvements was the FAA, with project funding of over $18 million that has already been received by the FAA. The Commission, we're seeking authorization from the Commission to enter into the supplemental grant agreement with FDOT that increases participation up to that $4,042,238 for a total of $4,662,238.
Any questions on that? Let's go to 5 then.
Okay. 5 is a proposed resolution authorizing the approval of a revised joint participation agreement, again with FDOT in the city. This is for the construction funding of State Road 572, Drainfield Road. This is the roundabout. When bids went out, bids came in above what FDOT expected. And so the revised JPA agreement increases FDOT's financial participation in the intersection improvement project by $372,766 for a total reimbursement of $2,190,022. And so based on the increased funding, this has been 100% funded.
See how we have no questions on these matters. We love 100% funding. Thank you, Ryan, for being present. 6. Oh, wait, I see a question from Commissioner Reed.
When do we anticipate that starting?
So the department will be able to encumber the funds about 2 weeks after we execute the revised JPA. The construction plans are complete. There is mitigation required for that project. The mitigation bank is the Alafai River Mitigation Bank, and there are currently no available credits within the bank. The Department of Transportation is funding the mitigation, and they're anticipating credits being available in the April to May time period of this year. And we'll begin construction immediately following that.
But you have to have mitigation credits first.
Can we use some of the ones we had set aside for the airport and then buy them back?
Yeah, well, to be 100% honest with you, the reason there's no mitigation credits is because the airport purchased all of the available mitigation credits. And I did try to coordinate this with them to see if there was some surplus. Yeah, you see them over there. To see if he had any surplus credits available, and the department was willing to purchase those credits from the airport. But unfortunately, there was no surplus credits available to expedite construction. But again, we're looking probably around May, another month or two before additional credits will be available.
Well, I'm glad that we have them anyway. So, okay, thank you.
And Mayor and Commissioners, if I could, with the Amazon project or the potential phase 2, we believe we're going to have additional credits, and we should have that squared away in about a month. So if there are additional credits, obviously we would sell them, obviously to FDOT so they could use them as well. So we're not trying to hoard them or anything. We're just quick to the uptake to get them as quickly as possible. So if we can help, we will.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for that aggressive leadership. Other questions by commissioners? All right, that brings us to the next item.
Okay, this is the item that Mr. Stearns was referring to, the proposed resolution that creates the Public Improvement Endowment Fund Board and also authorizes additional contributions to that fund as well. The board will consist of the city finance director, assistant finance director, and city treasurer, as well as the city manager being able to appoint a member and the mayor appoint a member as well. They will serve 3-year terms, and Jeff can probably chime in and more specifics on what the board will do.
Sure. I mean, just, on the background, obviously you all were involved in negotiating the lease amendment with the hospital, which provides for a $215 million payment to the city. This resolution authorizes the deposit of that money into the Public Improvement Endowment Fund, not the Public Improvement Fund, the Public Improvement Endowment Fund. People have all also expressed the intent for this to be, in essence, a permanent fund where we use the proceeds of any investment to fund projects, but that the corpus of the fund kind of remain constant. So this particular resolution, if you compared it to the pension ordinance, looks frighteningly familiar because we stole blatantly, and it basically establishes a board, 5 members that was just mentioned, to manage that investment and authorizes them to do so. The city charter actually delegates most investment authority for the city, other than the pension funds, which are different under state law, but authorizes most of the city investment activity to the finance director per the charter. So this is a deviation from that. The finance director felt strongly that when we're talking about a payment of that magnitude in a fund of that magnitude, that it was justified to have some separate and more enhanced kind of oversight of that fund. So it's intended to be invested similar as a long-term fund, similar to a pension fund. And that's what this resolution provides for.
Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Jeff, did we provide any holdback in the event we do better? They're going to be nice to build up that amount versus just spend it all.
Sure. I mean, the intent is certainly to just spend, the interest earnings, basically. Obviously, if we did better, we'd have more investment earnings. But any of expenditure of those investment earnings is going to have to come via the city commission as in the form of an appropriation. This doesn't provide spending authority. This just provides investing authority, if you will. Any expenditures out of that fund have to come back to the city commission and would be, presumably part of the annual budget process.
Thank you.
Other commissioners. All right. Thank you, Mr. Stearns. Appreciate that. That brings us to item 7. Ramona, although your mic shows you're on, we can't hear you. Ramona, we cannot hear you. Ramona.
You can't hear you. Oh. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't muted. I don't know what happened. Technical difficulty, but this this resolution provides for the subordination of city utility easements. The city's improving West Pipkin Road from Medulla to South Florida. So the resolution provides for the subordination of city water and wastewater utility easements. If the city utilities need to be relocated, then the county would pay for those costs of relocation, associated costs.
Questions by commissioners? Let's go to miscellaneous C2.
This is an agreement with CDW Government, LLC. This is for the replacement of the city's virtual server infrastructure for the city's main data center, as well as the city's disaster recovery center. Over the past several years, the city has invested in technology that is now coming to the end of its useful life, and this purchase is part of a regular replacement cycle of technology. It is available in IT's budget for FY21. This agreement with CDW is a 5-year agreement. The total is $3,372,866. That includes hardware, related software, as well as updates, and also a 5-year warranty on all the equipment being provided. Staff selected CDW pursuant to a cooperative purchasing agreements through Sourcewell for equipment, products, and services. And again, the total is $3,372,866. It is included in the Department of IT's replacement account budget for FY 2021. And I think Tom Jones is here to discuss any technical questions you may have with regard to the technology being procured.
Tom, this is a server mirror. Is that what we're talking about?
This is the infrastructure that supports all of our virtual servers. So we're somewhere around 98% virtual for our server farm. Just under 400 servers that we support. This infrastructure is located both at our primary data center and at our DR site. So we have the ability to fail over at will in case of any sort of disaster that would happen. And like I say, it includes all servers, the backup of those servers, and storage, miscellaneous compute.
Do we then have this backed up at any other remote locations?
With the two data centers, each data center essentially replicates each other. So we have it in multiple locations.
Okay. Question by commissioners. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And this is because of pricing would be my only last question. This is because you're doing this through a group of other like municipalities, I assume, that this gives you this price?
Similar state to a state contract, pre-negotiated pricing, and that's always a not to exceed price. So I usually do diligence to beat the vendors up as much as possible to get it down to.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments or questions? All right, next item.
The next item is a task authorization with Chastain Skillman for engineering services for water utility relocations at State Road 400 I-4 and the State Road 33 interchange. FDOT's work will include road widening and drainage improvements requiring relocation of water and wastewater utilities. The proposed task authorization with Chastain Skillman is for the engineering services related to those relocations for those projects. This will be the work will be done in accordance with a continuing contract that was already approved by the City Commission. The total not to exceed cost related to the work is $235,600, and all reimbursable expenses will be paid in accordance with the city's consultant expense reimbursement policy.
This expense would also be consistent with the kind of investment FDOT would want us to be making as a city towards that intersection as well. And that's questions really directed to City Manager Drouse.
Yes, sir. We've been coordinating with FDOT for, the advancement of any related, city needs in that particular area, so that should we have the opportunity to see that that project, advance, we would have accommodated that prior to that opportunity. So we've had ongoing discussions, including just a recent phone call that I had with the FDOT District 1 director.
Excellent. Other questions by commissioners? All right, seeing none, that brings us into, miscellaneous C4.
Yes, this is the grant agreement with Florida Department of Environmental Protection. This is for the Recreational Trails Program grant to complete 7 wetlands trails. The total project cost was estimated at $475,658, and this particular grant would reimburse 50% of the total cost and is equal to $237,829. The required matching funds is in the water utilities FY 21 and 22 budget. And this will be the final completion of the master plan of the 22 miles of trails as well.
So this is applicable only to the non-developed trails currently?
Correct.
All right, Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. I'm glad Bill's here. I'm going to ask him a couple of questions now. On our several wetlands, where does that water ultimately discharge to?
So right now we have 2 opportunities to release that water. The first is to the Tampa Electric Company, TECO. That was an agreement we went into with them, and they started actually taking water back, if my memory serves, in 2016. When we have excess water that TECO can't take, we then discharge that to the Alafaya River, ultimately.
Where's Piney Point? Was that Alafaya River?
I believe so. Isn't that down toward Tampa Bay?
Well, it's just Florida EPC. It just I got some notice yesterday. They're going to release 480 million gallons of contaminated water down at Piney Point to Lower Tampa Bay, and I want to make sure that it doesn't. We don't get in trouble for if the nutrients come up, that we get to monitor that somehow, that they don't accuse us of doing something.
No, sir, we shouldn't, as far as I know. So we closely monitor our discharge. We are there's this greater organization, part of the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, called the Tampa Bay Nitrogen Management Coordination Committee, and we're part of that, and we attend those meetings. And so any excess nutrients, especially for what's called a point discharge, such as what we are, we know exactly what we're discharging at any given time. So any blowback, if you will, from that type of discharge shouldn't at all come back on us, and we're so far upstream from that I don't foresee any issue there.
Okay, because I know that one of the phosphate companies has got an allocation to discharge that 480 million gallons. That seems like a lot of contaminated water they're going to discharge into Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and I would hope, again, not being familiar with that, I would hope that that will be closely monitored and they've received the appropriate permits for that.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Anderson, and for your cautioning, Commissioner Reed. Any other questions? All right, let us go to, let's see, that was, you have item 5 we already did, which we're going to leave on the agenda. Did you want to do any more discussion on that by any of the commissioners today? We talked about this earlier during the consent. Okay, so that takes us, we're finished. Because we have, okay, so I have, Commissioner South.
Sir, I do have something for the commission. I'll defer till after the workshop, or I could do it now if you'd like.
I'd like you to do it now, sir, please, and then I have one as well.
All right, thank you. Barring a runoff on Tuesday, this will be my last meeting on the agenda studies. And I want to impose upon the City Commission to reconsider the City Commission meeting times. I know the purpose of going to a 3 p.m. meeting was to make it more accessible to the general public. And I've watched this now for 3 months, and I think there are some unintended consequences that I'd like you to take a look at. The purpose of increasing participation, and I'll say it's the pandemic, so it's unfair of me to say it's not improved, but I have not seen a demonstrable increase in participation by having it in the afternoon. And it seems to me with a 3 p.m. start time, if you have to take off work, you're going to have to take it off whether at 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock. So I've always questioned just how more accessible it does to the audience to come at 3 o'clock. And I will confess that evening city commission meetings, to me, harken back to the time when we were a small city. You closed the shop and went down to City Hall, made a couple votes, and went home. And that is not the case now. We are dealing with complex, multi-million-dollar, detailed questions that deserve our full attention. And I just think that we would do better to do that in the morning. Now, let's take a look at the meetings. We all see staff in the chambers when we're having our meeting, but we all know that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are deputies, administrative assistants, all hanging back in the offices all over this building, waiting to be called upon by one of us. Some of those are hourly workers who are getting time and a half. I know I could see that's a nominal cost, but we are tying up a lot of people waiting to go through these city commission meetings. And the other thing too, we talk about transparency, and things are changing, I think in large part to the pandemic. We are learning how to follow things live streaming through our desk computer. I've sat many times with the city commission meetings on my screen in the office. Advocacy groups contact us through emails, social media, phone calls. They seldom use the city chambers, the city commission chambers, as a place to advocate unless it's in a large group. Plus, it's archived. You can go back anytime and see what happened at a city commission meetings. And speaking of transparency, what the 3 o'clock meeting does, it misses the daily press cycle. The Ledger reporters have a deadline of 2 p.m. to get their stories in. The TV media have about a 5 p.m. deadline to get any film down to the studio. And so what happens, with the exception of Lakeland Now and the Citizenship, what happens at the city commission meeting is not really told to the public until Wednesday's paper. And I think that is a problem. I think we have obligations, especially on these controversial issues of public interest, that we are in sync with the press cycle. And I think the 3 p.m. start time really hinders that. But really what I'm looking at, Monday is the toughest day of the week for most of us. We got to work all day. It's Mondays. We're dealing with issues. And now I look at it, I look at the staff. It's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. I want to go home to my kid's soccer game. I want supper. And I sense in this commission and the staff, hey, let's just get this done so we can get out of here. So I think that we would be better served if you would take a look at going back to the 9 a.m. City Commission meeting. When we came in Monday morning, everybody's bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to get to work. So it's just my final shot. I'll ask you to reconsider it. It's not my business. You'll have to decide this as 7 people, but just an observer from somebody who loves this committee and this city. Thank you.
I appreciate that being your point, because it's my point. So that will make short order of both of those. We started this process, and you and I, neither one knew that we were going to do that. So nature of sunshine. We started this process September in 2018. We said at that time we would try and evaluate it. I'm proposing that we consider changing back as of the June meetings to our 9 o'clock start time on Monday. Which will be effectively our first meeting will be June 7th, 2021. It is fresher minds. It avoids unnecessary delays during the day. It uses staff time, as you mentioned, much more effectively. We have the Vimeo live broadcast capability for anyone who wants to view. We index well on Vimeo so that people can go and write to see what we have done and what they're interested in covering after the fact. And so it does impact the need for people to be present in the room. Public attendance has not been demonstrably different, even pre-COVID, between that period of time. So we have been in that position prior to COVID, and the media coverage is hindered. An additional opportunity is we could take the utility committee meetings and move them to Friday of the agenda study prior to each month's first commission meeting. What that would allow us to do, and we'd have to decide this, is we could start that utility committee meeting at 11 firm, and if you look at the clock, we're at 10:30 now, or we could start that utility committee meeting at 1, where it would negatively impact us as policy workshops as a window. So if we started it at 1 firmly on Friday and did our policy workshops in between, that would be a way to be able to accomplish that. Or you can say, because we may not normally have policy workshops, let's go to 11 for the commission, for the utility committee meeting. And then if we have a public workshop, we would do it at 1 and be able to stay in the chamber together and kind of know that that first Mondays or that first Friday prior to the first Monday's meeting is going to be a heavier Friday day that we engage. the summary of our recommendation, I think we're doing together at this point, Commissioner Selvage, is effective June 21st, move the commission meeting start time to 9, change the utility committee monthly meeting to Friday of the agenda study prior to each month's first commission meeting, and then C, choose a time between 11 or 1. And we need to give this notice so that there's time for us to implement it in advance, as we had originally done when we did the start of the commission meeting in September of 2018, and put that notice out at that time. So comments from commissioners. Commissioner Reed.
Thank you. Don, I appreciate that. Again, ironically, it was something I was going to bring up today also. I guess there must be something in the air, but I would endorse that as well. I'm not sure when our previous utility commission meetings were, but they didn't seem to get in the way of what they used to be. I'm not sure. But again, I'm glad you brought it up, and that's something that I would endorse personally as well.
The value of the commission meeting, Commissioner Reed, on Friday is that it would allow, of the utility meeting, I'm sorry, on Friday, is allow them to take some actions that we can make sure we get into the Monday commission meeting at 9 o'clock on that Monday morning. So that's why we would want to bump it back as opposed to have it be afterwards, because then the impact's another month really in some of those cases. And this is, by the way, okay, and I previewed it with our executive director, Ivy, as well as our city manager, Sean Drous, on the utility committee timing move.
In 2018, when were our utility meetings? I don't recall exactly.
1 o'clock p.m. Monday afternoon.
Okay.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Selvage. And who knows, you may be around another month longer if there is a runoff. So we're not bidding you farewell just yet. But I would support the recommendation. And I certainly, for those of you who have served for a long period of time and have seen both scenarios of starting at 9, starting at 3, just to me, your case makes sense to switch it and go back to the 9 a.m. start. I do think we're fresher in the mornings. And if we have long marathon type meetings, I know those aren't the norm, but it gives us a lot more flexibility and buffer in the day. My only comment, Mayor, about the Friday schedule is I don't know that I would prefer trying to reserve space for a workshop and utility committee meeting. I think that's ambitious to try and squeeze in agenda study, workshops, and utility committee. Just even look now, I'm not sure we'll make the workshops. So that would be my only comment there, that maybe if we have utility committee on Friday, that we just look for other days for policy workshops.
I think that's a good comment, and that would make your saying 11 o'clock, for example, would be your preference in that. Commissioner Madden, and then Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor. I would concur with Commissioner McLeod. It gave me a little anxiety thinking that we could be realistic and have all of the policy workshops and the utility committee, but I think it's a good point. Most of us, I think of the Monday of Commission Day as pretty much a full day. It's a commission-focused day. And so rather than try to have the utility meeting before the commission meeting on Monday morning, we knew that the commission meeting was approximately 9 to noon, I know sometimes when we had those morning meetings, we would stay for lunch and have, an extended time, so if we went to the 1 o'clock policy workshop on the Monday after the commission meeting, I think that we're all kind of in that mindset of Mondays as a commission meeting. And so I'd make that suggestion. If the utility meeting is more appropriate on Friday to be able to give utility time to make those into our agenda on Monday, then I would suggest that we do agenda study, utility meeting on Fridays, and then commission and policy workshops on Mondays.
I'm going to hop in. That's okay, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
I agree. I think that it's a little overzealous to do utility on a Friday if we're going to have a workshop. But we could. I like Commissioner Madden's idea of pushing that to the Monday afternoon after a regularly scheduled 9 a.m. Monday meeting. But also, if we just limited to the first Friday, not first Friday, but last Friday before the first Monday meeting for utility. But we know that that second agenda study of the month, there could be time for policy workshop. You know, maybe we just block those for policy workshops, because we are having a lot of those, which I like policy workshops and looking at everything and being able to discuss it with my peers on the commission and have a dialogue. But you know, I don't know if we need them every time, but maybe we can be a little bit flexible with that. But I thank you, Commissioner Selvage and Mayor Metzen and Commissioner Reed, for bringing this up, because 3 o'clock, I completely concur with Commissioner Selvage. In the old days and in smaller municipalities, those evening meetings are, you know, very conducive to what everyone is doing. But when you have $626 million budget that you're looking at and the issues that we're faced with, I would prefer to do it first thing in the morning on a Monday versus at 3 p.m. And I also think that 3 p.m., although was, you know, trying to be helpful to people who work, you still do have to take time off work. If you're picking up kids from school, it's a hard time when you are a parent who has a family. I mean, whether you're sitting on the commission or you're trying to get there to be informed citizen, that is not an easy time to get downtown. And I do agree that with virtual meetings and also with our communications team does such a great job to push the information out there that you can access it at any time and you can see what's going on. So thanks for bringing this to the forefront for discussion. I am on board, and I like Commissioner Madden's idea of the Monday after a meeting having a workshop, or as I suggested, maybe just doing it that second time, a second agenda study of the month.
Excellent comments. I saw Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm glad the subject matter is back on the table. And I ask you all to forgive me for having to step away. I just was noticed about, I had death in my immediate family, and I was trying to get some information to find out what's going on, but neither here nor there. I'm here still to serve as I need to do. But I was going to bring this particular subject matter up as well. And thank you, Don, Commissioner Savage, for bringing it up. I had spoken with city manager about, you know, the next time around, I think it's time, because I think we had some conversation already, Mr. Mayor, as you know, earlier. And I think it's just come to head now that we need to try to, I think, do or deal with the change I think would be necessary for us all. I'm being one of the, I guess, older, not in age, but in service, you know,
just an experience
on the commission, and seeing, you know, what both particular scenarios have been. I have to concur again with my fellow colleagues, Commissioner Salvage. I think the Monday morning time I believe has proved to be the best timing for all of us and our various business people that need to be involved with the process. And as you've heard several comments say, we're a growing community, a growing city, meaning that we're going to have more things, particular situations to deal with, more somewhat things of controversy. It takes time, and if you start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, as we know, as we have seen, can be prolonged. When it first was brought to the table and then we changed it as we did, at the time, I was not in favor somewhat of moving toward a 3 o'clock time. I thought, well, if we're trying to catch people who are saying that they can't get to meetings because of it being a morning time period, I said, well, I was in favor of this moving even to 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. If you try to catch those ones that are working or cannot get off of work or having a challenge trying to get to meetings because of that. But as I've seen it, still at 3 o'clock, I have not seen the turnout or the I guess the numbers that we were hoping to see, and that's why I'm in favor now of going back. And as you alluded to already, to Commissioner Salvage, you know, we have so many different ways of our constituents making contact with us. You know, it's not. I don't think we have in our particular community anyone that do not know how to catch us or be engaged with us or know how to get to us. And there's so many other means to make it happen. And it's working because we're involved in it. And the COVID has proved that, even with what we're doing now and how we transact business and take care of situations. So I'm all in favor of going back to the morning meeting. I was waiting for the discussion to come about. Now, hearing what I've heard about some other particular concerns, I will probably need to give some more thought to it because I just got back on the call as I just shared with you because of a personal situation. But I think it's something that we need to look at as well.
Well, this is a change we could make in this agenda study if someone wants to make a motion and there's a second. And we can move forward so that we could enable staff to start that whole process of notification.
So moved.
And is there a second? Second from Commissioner McCarley. Discussion by commissioners. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed, same. It unanimously passes. So as of June, we will begin our meetings at 9 a.m. and incorporate that schedule with the utility committee meeting at 11. And then we'll work in workshops as are reasonable to do. All right, we're going to take a break so that we can begin the policy workshop, and we'll start at 10:45.